thank the gentleman. We'll start a second round. Mr. Ellis, were you aware that at least 50 of the orphaned wells in Alaska were originally years ago drilled by the United States Navy? It was the Navy that abandoned them.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm aware that some of those are Navy wells. I don't know if it's 50, but I'm aware that some are Navy wells. Okay.
And this is a direct question. Were you aware, or were any of the bonds that were in the Rawlins Field office replaced? Now, you said they're there, but were bonds in the Rawlins Field office, any of them actually replaced?
All right, so if I may, for clarification purposes, so you're suggesting that the bonds are accountable, that maybe that there were some that weren't there, now they're back? Is that?
Sir, unless you're deaf, you've heard another witness testify 80% of the bonds were not available in the Rawlins Field office. 20% were in project files. Your letter says all the bonds are accounted for, so I'm asking you whether you know whether some or all of the 80% that were originally missing, as testified to today, were those replaced?
What I'm aware of is that all the bonds today are accounted for.
Have you heard the testimony today that 80% of the bonds were missing?
I did hear what GAO had to say.
Have you investigated whether or not any were ever missing?
The question I asked the acting state director of Wyoming was to find out, based on what was read in the draft report, if some bonds had been shredded and if the bonds are accounted for. And I was, as I said earlier.
Did you ever see the letter that the Chairman Bishop and I sent to Director Carnsey?
I did.
So you ignored all those questions that we were asking, and you just simply asked, are the bonds there now?
Yes, we asked BLM in Wyoming if to look into the matter to see if there had.
Now, sir, you just testified that you asked them if the bonds were there. Is that what you asked?
We asked him, Mr. Chairman, to look into the matter, and based on what we saw in the draft report, they responded to us that their bonds were not shredded and all the bonds are accountable for and in the safe.
Now, so your testimony, and by the way, I didn't swear you in. I think we're going to start swearing witnesses in. But even if you're not sworn in, it's a crime to testify untruthfully before a congressional committee. Now, the question that I've been trying to get an answer to is with regard to what happened to the 80%. And you're testifying to this committee of your own knowledge that there were no bonds ever shredded. Is that what you're testifying to?
That is the information that I was given from.
And you're willing to stand on that no bonds were ever shredded? You willing to stand on that under penalty of testifying falsely? Because a lawyer would advise you, if you don't know, you better say, I don't know. But if you're saying they weren't shredded based on the evidence that I had, then there is an obligation you have to make sure you got proper evidence and not mislead this Congress. So let me ask you again. Are you testifying that no bonds were ever shredded?
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated earlier in my testimony and in the response.
I'm asking you a direct question. Is it your testimony that no bonds were ever shredded?
I can only testify to what I was told.
All right, so you better testify to what you know of your own personal knowledge. Are you testifying to this panel, to this committee, that no bonds were ever shredded? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, I asked the question of our acting state director, bonds, to look into this.
So your testimony is that bonds were not shredded. Is that right? Yes or no?
My testimony is what I had in the record, what I have.
So why don't you say, I don't know? That would be a safer answer than saying that, yes, you inquired and no bonds were shredded. Because if you say I inquired and no bonds are shredded, I'm telling you, Mr. Ellis, you are misleading this committee. I'm asking you, do you want that on the record? Your testimony is that no bonds were shredded.
I was told by this acting state director of Wyoming when
I'm asking if you stand by what you
Point
were
of
told.
parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman. I've just heard you interrupt the witness, I think no less than 10 times.
And a person asking
Are
the
we
question,
entitled to
your
actually hear
point
his
is,
testimony, or do
your
you get to
point
shout
is
him down every
invalid
time he tries to
because
talk?
a witness
Is
is
it
required
bullying, or
to
is this
answer the
oversight
questions.
and
The
question?
gentleman is out of order.
The chairman is out of order.
Thank you. But if we are not allowed to get questions answered by witnesses, then these hearings
Let him answer.
are worthless.
Exactly. So let him answer, and then they won't
And
be
he
worthless.
would not answer the
You can
question.
shout on YouTube anytime you want.
I'm asking the question one final time. And, sir, I realize we don't have a Department of Justice that has carried out any prosecution so far, but someday we will. And I'm asking you, are you standing by testimony that no bonds were shredded?
Mr. Chairman, I responded two ways. One, the Inspector General is investigating this. I look forward to the Inspector General getting down and finding the facts.
Well, that's not answering the question. So you're saying that you didn't do your job. You're let somebody else investigate.
No, what I'm saying is that we inquired. I had the state director, the acting state director inquire.
And you believe that. That's your testimony. No bonds were shredded.
That is the information that was provided to me.
And you stand by that. You believe it.
The information that was provided to me. With that said, I look forward to reading the
You believe it or not?
report.
I'm just trying to get an answer. You provided that information to Congress. Do you believe no bonds were shredded?
All I can go by, Mr. Chairman, is what
I'm asking you, do you believe no bonds were shredded?
It's my understanding from the BLM in Wyoming.
Do you believe no bonds were shredded?
I can only go by what I was told.
Do you believe no
Regular
bonds
order,
were
Mr.
shredded?
Chairman.
We're trying to get an answer to the question that the witness will not answer. Do you believe it or not? You're the assistant director. Just answer the question.
Mr. Chairman, can I respectfully say that we have an Inspector General's investigation going on. We are dealing in hearsay, period. I don't like anybody's reputation, integrity being done on hearsay. I think that, the GAO study looked at it, could not find enough information. The Inspector General is. We are all very concerned about hearsay reports, but even when the GAO looked at it, badgering the witness today isn't going to get us any further. I think we look forward to the Inspector General's study.
And as an explanation, credibility is always an issue. And this gentleman made inquiry, and his testimony as to the credibility of the information he got is always going to be an issue, whether the OIG looks into it or not. And for him, if he did not believe the information he got, that is certainly important, whether the OIG looks into it or not. But frankly, I'm so tired of government officials hiding behind some other answer and not doing their jobs when laws and regulations are being violated. They put people in prison for violating them if you're not in the government, and yet nobody's held accountable in the government. I want that to stop, and that's why I kept pushing for an answer. So, sir, do you believe that no bonds were shredded based on the credibility of the people that told you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, based on what I know of our acting associate state director, yeah, she indicated that based on them inquiring, looking into that no bonds were shredded.
Were they replaced?
I have full confidence in Mary Jo's feedback on that.
All right, my time's expired. lady, Ms. Dingle, is recognized for 5 minutes, and if they don't answer your questions, then however long it takes to get an answer.